Hello everyone. Today we are in Puerto Penasco, Mexico, or Rocky Point. So this is a beautiful, beautiful beach. As you can tell, there is basically nobody. This is about, I think it was about 8 a.m. and it's as you can tell, the tide went all the way in. So it goes in for literally miles. Well, maybe not miles, but it's definitely way out there. And you can find beautiful shells on this beach, and it is perfect for yoga. So today we're going to work on the hips and the spine as well. So once ready, we're gonna come down to recline butterfly. Now, I don't have any props here, so I just don't use any. But ideally, if you've seen some of the previous videos, we put some type of either rolled blanket just below the shoulder lines, or you can use a bolsters. Anything that kind of sits behind your shoulders and allows your chest to open. So bring the sole of your feet together and allow the knees to fall wide open. And this is definitely one of the most relaxing poses. You have an opportunity here to slow down your breath and start calming your mind. A good way to connect with your breath is to count to 5 in your inhale and count to 5 or 6. It's always better actually to make the exhale longer without forcing, without pushing it out, just a gentle breathing. So as I mentioned, we're going to target our hip. The hips it's in Yin Yoga, we target the area from the navel to the knees, and the hips is the location, the area of our body where we have most ligaments, tight ligaments, tendons, and so it's a tight area, and we carry a lot of loads, and our emotions as well are stored in our hips. So it's a tight area. There are over 20 muscles that cross the hips. If you think about the collection of the inner thigh muscle known as the adductors, that's one part. But then we have the collection of the outer thigh muscles known as the abductors. Then we have the hip flexors in the front. That's the iliopsoas. So iliopsoas, there's two muscles, iliacus and the psoas, that just cross in front of our hip. We also have the deep lateral rotators in the back. There is a lot of muscles, and that prevents our range of motions. So during this practice, we're trying to, of course, always relax the muscles and trying to get into these hip sockets, the ligaments and the capsule of our hip joints, and try to relax it, trying to regain some of the range. Slowly start coming out of the pose. Perhaps bring your knees to your chest. And we're gonna go directly into the next pose, which is half happy baby. So usually we do a full happy baby, which consists of bringing both knees towards your armpits, but this is a concentrate more on just one hip at a time, and I like to change it. So again, bring your knees toward your armpit, so a little bit outside your chest, and you have to use the muscles of your biceps to pull your knees down. So it's not totally a yin pose where we don't use any muscles. There is some engagement in your muscles, at least the muscles of your arm, but try to relax everything else. The pose is a great hip opener, and it's also a great decompression. It also releases and decompresses the sacroiliac joints. At the same time, if you're pulling your knee towards your chest, you're actually providing some compression into your internal organs. So let go of your leg, and you're gonna feel it. Definitely some fragility on that hip joint. So let go slowly and stretch the leg out, and when ready, just go and grab the other foot with your hand and pull it towards your armpit. So we're doing the same thing that we did on the opposite side. Since we're not totally symmetric, we're gonna feel some difference, maybe more tension, maybe less tension. Maybe we need to do some tweaking, some adjusting in order to actually feel the pose. Remember that in Yin Yoga, we're not looking at the form, we're looking at the final sensation of the pose we get into. So if you feel it, you're doing it right, regardless of what it looks like. This is that's why I fell in love with this practice. It's really a great way to keep our body healthy without concentrating too much on the aesthetic of it. Through this practice, we are concentrating on breaking down those collagen fibers that cross-link and restrict our range of motion. We concentrate on changing the structure of our tissue from gel-like to water, so that the toxins and the particles can be released and be flushed out. Very slowly start coming out of the pose. Release the foot down and stretch both legs and arms above your head. Give yourself a nice good stretch. Perhaps bring your knees to your chest and gently, without disturbing your body too much, come to a seated position for our next pose, which is butterfly. So to get into this pose, bring the sole of your feet together, let the knees fall out, and I always like to use a blanket, although I do not have one here, but if you do have a blanket at home, and I'd at least try it out and see how it feels to put a blanket, a folded blanket under your sitting bones, so that you elevate your hips a little higher, and it's easier to tilt forward, and that's what we want to accomplish. We want to make sure that our pelvis is not tilting back but actually forward. And then let your spine come down without keeping it straight. Let it follow the natural curve, and just let gravity take you down. This is a fantastic pose. I read somewhere that if you don't have time for any poses but one, this should be the pose. I have read somewhere that if you have time to just do one Yin Yoga pose, this should be the one. It provides so much benefits from the energetic standpoint. It touches so many meridians, as well as the areas of the bodies that it targets, from your spine to the hip joints, the adductors, the hamstrings, and even your cervical spine when you let your neck down. So it's probably my favorite pose as well. Now there are several variations, so if you're not able to get into this pose because maybe you have issues on your lower back, then maybe you, instead of letting your spine curve, follow the natural curve, just keep it straight. Likewise, if you have issues with sciatica, where the pose is pinching and pressing down to your sciatic nerve, perhaps you want to elevate your hips by putting folded blanket under your sitting bones, so that your hips is higher than your knees. If that still doesn't work and you still have issues or pain, just you can skip this pose altogether. Very slowly start making your way up. Make sure that your head is the last thing to come up. And perhaps you want to use your hands to close your knees together. At the same time, place your feet at the edge of the mats so that the knees are wide open, and start doing some counter pose by dropping the knees one way and the other. And when ready, we're gonna get into the next pose, which is square. So let's start by placing the right foot in front of the left. So a good way to get into this pose is by crossing your feet together and then slowly trying to push the feet out in front of you. Eventually you want to get to the shins being parallel to the front edge of the mat. Again, use your best judgment as how far into this pose you want to get. It can be pretty deep and pretty intense, so you can stop prior to getting your shin bones parallel if that's where you can reach. Now at the same time, remember we're also adding a nice forward fold. Just like with the previous pose, make sure you don't have any issues with your low back, and sitting on a folded blanket always helps out a lot. And again, try to follow the 3 principles of Yin Yoga as mentioned by Sarah Powers. First one being, get into the pose and find your appropriate edge that works for you. Number 2, relax. You have to relax the muscles to get to the connective tissue, and try to hold the pose without fidgeting. Stay in and use your breath to help you out. And the third one is hold for time. We're gonna be here for 5 minutes, so time is the essence of this pose. All right, and very gently, let's come out of this pose. You're gonna feel it for sure. We have been targeting the hip joints, so as we get out of these poses, we're very fragile. A good counter pose here could be reverse tabletop. Um, and again, windshield wiper is always a great alternative as well. And very slowly and gently, just let's get into the same pose but with the left foot forward. Now you probably have noticed that I don't have any props for this class, but that was not actually planned. Traveling with 3 kids, the house, I mean the car was very full. We we weren't able to bring any additional props this time, but that gives you the hint that you can practice Yin Yoga anywhere, and really all you need is a mat, if even that. But that doesn't mean that props are bad or you can go without it too. I found myself that the best way to practice Yin Yoga is actually with props, because only by using props you're going to find that Goldilocks, that perfect sensation in the right places of your body. So props are your friends, and they will help you when you have a hard time getting into the pose where you can't totally relax your muscles, or you are maybe too tight to get in certain poses. So props like blocks and the blankets will help you to gently get to your objective even faster in a certain way, without forcing your body, without pushing it. So start coming out of the pose very gently. Again, try to move very slowly, transitioning from one pose to another one. Stretch your legs out, perhaps another tabletop. Follow what your body needs as a counter pose. And then, moving very slowly, we're gonna come to all four, and we're gonna get ready to get into melting heart. So the only cue I give you here is try to keep your hips aligned with your knees and start coming forward to the degree that you feel something without feeling pain. Extending your arms out, for instance, for some people might cause pain in the shoulders. If that's the case, move your arms outside, and you can again, the variation is either move a little bit forward or backwards, depending on where you feel the sensation. This is a good back bend for especially your thoracic spine. If you feel too much stress in your chest, you can place a bolsters under your chest. The way it will allow your body to relax even further. To come out of this pose, maybe you want to come back to all four, and if you like it, then come back down to child pose. It's a nice decompression of your spine. And if not, you can come directly into our next pose, which is cat catching his tail. And we're gonna start with the left leg forward. So with your back on the mat, stretch your left leg forward in front of you, while at the same time you pull your bent right leg behind you. If this is too much of a pose for you, it's too deep, or you can't keep your leg straight, just get to the degree that you can. It's a twist, and if you don't want to do this type of twist, you can do any type of twist, and you can keep both knees together and twist to the right hand side. In both cases, try to keep both shoulder blades onto the mat if you can, and turn your gaze on the left hand side if that feels good. If doesn't, just play with it. See what does feel good. I found practicing in this location particularly inspiring. The fact that there are really no people or just a couple of souls every so often makes it a wonderful location to really fall in the meditational state that perhaps for non-experienced people is hard to find in the midst of chaos and maybe kids or noises or cars. So here literally you can only hear the ocean and the birds and the beautiful aroma or smell of salty water. So it would be a fantastic thing to be able to practice in a location like this, but I think that with time you should be able to practice Yin Yoga and be able to fall in the meditational stage pretty much anywhere. And the skill that you acquire through this practice is that once you fall in the state of meditation, you're able to block out anything that's around you that to otherwise would be disturbing. But that takes a long time, and I'm not definitely even remotely close to it. I consider myself a beginner, and I enjoy this practice because, again, it's a way for me to have that moment. It could be even just maybe a few seconds of disconnecting my mind, which is constantly active. And so I find the benefit, and I can see it. I can relate when people talk about how practicing constantly and being diligent about your practice can eventually that few seconds of peace can eventually extend and become minutes of disconnection, and in which you really flush your mind out and clear everything in there. So you feel almost, once you're out, you feel like you lifted a 10-pound bag from your head, literally. Start getting out of the pose by releasing your front leg. Come back to a neutral spine. Good option here is to either stretch out your legs and your arms above your head, or bring your knees to your chest and massage your lower back. It's a good important thing to readjust your spine every time you are in a twisted pose. When ready, just do the opposite side. This is a good pose to open the lumbar and the sacrum area of your body. As I mentioned before, we want to feel the pose somewhere. So the hints I'll give you every time we get into a pose should allow you to at least understand if you are getting some stress in those areas, and if not, maybe there is something you have to move. In this pose, you should feel the target areas being the quadriceps and the upper thighs, and as well some hip juiciness, as well, as we are actually affecting the hip joints as well. Now we're putting also, since we're twisting our rib cage, we are also targeting some of the chest areas as well. And we have come to the end of this pose as well. So a good stretch. Bring your knees, your legs back to the original place. Realign your spine. Perhaps bring your knees to your chest. You are already prepared for the final pose, corpse pose or shavasana. So make sure nothing is bothering you right now. There are no objects nearby you. Find the most comfortable position and enjoy it. Slowly start bringing your awareness back into your body. Make small movements, your toes, your fingers. Keeping your eyes closed, Turn on one side. And by using the strength of your arm, bring yourself to a seated position. Cross your legs, keeping the sense of calmness. Take a couple of deep breaths. Bring your hands to your chest, Anjali Mudra. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great class for me. I hope it was the same for you. We'll see you next time.